The emergency signal cut through space like a scream in the dark. Deep in the Galactic Council chambers on Station Harmony Prime, Communication Officer Zeltis jumped as the distress beacon lit up his console in angry red. The signal was weak, broken, coming from the edge of known space where few dared to travel. Council Speaker Thylix, Zeltis called out, his feathered crest trembling with worry. We have an emergency transmission coming in from the outer rim. The tall, graceful being that led the Galactic Council turned from the window where she had been watching ships come and go. Her blue skin shifted to a worried purple as she moved toward the communication station. Put it through, Zeltis. The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through, high and musical like wind chimes, but filled with terror that made everyone in the room freeze. Please, anyone who can hear this. We are the colony ship Harmony's Dream. The Carvex Syndicate. They found us. They boarded our ship. They are taking our young ones. Our children. The voice broke into sobs. They say they will sell them to the highest bidder. We cannot fight them. We are not warriors. Please, someone help us, the children. They are so scared. The transmission cut to static, then silence. Council Speaker Thylix stood frozen, her skin now a deep purple that showed her distress. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species looked at each other with fear and sadness. Everyone knew about the Carvex Syndicate. They were pirates and slavers who lived in the lawless regions beyond Council space. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who tried to stop them. How long ago was this sent? Thylix asked. 3 days, Zeltis replied, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 days. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people who looked like walking flowers. They made beautiful art and wrote poetry about the stars. They had never hurt anyone in their long history. And now their children were in the hands of monsters. We must do something, said Ambassador Kethmore, representing the warrior caste of the Drachnari. But even as he spoke, his scaled face showed doubt. Though the Carvex have 12 warships and a fortress in that system, any rescue mission would be suicide, finished Ambassador Yillith from her floating tank. The aquatic being's tentacles writhed with worry. They are too strong, too dangerous. Perhaps we could negotiate. Negotiate? Thylix's voice rose. They are child slavers, Yillith. What would we negotiate with? Credits, Yillith said sadly. Money. It is all they understand. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone knew the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. The council was made up of civilized species. They solved problems with words, with trade, with careful diplomacy. They were not equipped to fight monsters who stole children. The debate went on for hours. Some wanted to send a diplomatic mission. Others suggested offering the Carvex money to release the Zephyrians. A few brave souls talked about mounting a rescue mission, but when they looked at the numbers, 12 warships plus a fortress, the talk quickly died. It was on the second day of debate when the human delegation arrived. The humans were still new to the Galactic Council. Their planet, Terra, was what the galaxy called a death world, a place so dangerous that most species would die just from breathing the air. The humans who came from this nightmare world were strange. They looked soft and weak, but there were stories about them. Dark stories that made other species uncomfortable. Admiral Chen Vasquez led the human delegation. She was a small woman with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. Behind her walked 3 other humans, all military officers judging by the way they moved. We heard about the Zephyrian situation, Admiral Chen said without any greeting. Her voice was quiet but somehow filled the entire chamber. We volunteer to handle the rescue mission. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Council Speaker Thylix raised her hand for silence. Admiral Chen, we appreciate your offer, but this is a very dangerous situation. The Carvex Syndicate has substantial military assets. Perhaps a more diplomatic approach would be better. Diplomatic? Admiral Chen's voice stayed calm, but something in her eyes grew cold. They took children, Speaker Thylix. How do you negotiate with child slavers? We could offer to pay for their release, suggested Ambassador Yillith. It would be expensive, but And what happens to the next ship they capture? Admiral Chen asked. What happens when they learn that taking children gets them paid? The human admiral stepped forward, and several alien representatives moved back without thinking about it. There was something about the way humans moved that made other species nervous, like predators trying to look tame. The distress call was sent 3 days ago. Admiral Chen continued. How long do you think those children have before something terrible happens to them? How long do you think we should debate while they suffer? Admiral, Council Speaker Thylak said carefully, the Karvek Syndicate is extremely dangerous. They have 12 warships and a fortified base. Even if you could win such a battle, the risk to the hostages would be... There is always risk, Admiral Chen interrupted. But there is also certainty. If we do nothing, those children will be sold into slavery. They will suffer for the rest of their lives. That is certain. The chamber fell silent. The humans stood there waiting. And there was something about their patience that felt dangerous, like big cats waiting for the right moment to strike. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Ambassador Kethmore. We send the UES Retribution to handle the situation, Admiral Chen replied. One ship, minimal political complications. If we fail, the Council can honestly say they did not authorize our actions. One ship? Ambassador Yillith's tentacles writhed in shock. Against 12 Karvek's warships, that is madness. Is it? Admiral Chen asked. What do you know about human warships, Ambassador? The question hung in the air. The truth was that most of the Council knew very little about human military capabilities. They had heard rumors, stories about human ships that fought like wild animals, tales of human soldiers who kept fighting even when they should be dead. But these were just stories, weren't they? We know humans are. Aggressive, Thylak said carefully. But the numbers matter, Admiral Chen agreed. But so does motivation, so does training, so does the willingness to do what needs to be done. She paused and looked around the chamber. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but somehow more frightening than if she had shouted. You call us Deathworlders. You think that means we do not value life. You are wrong. We value life so much that we are willing to become monsters to protect it. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed quiet. Give us authorization to respond to the distress call, Admiral Chen said. We will bring those children home. Council Speaker Thylak looked around the chamber. She saw fear in the faces of her fellow representatives. Fear of the humans, fear of the Karveks, fear of making the wrong choice. But she also saw the truth that everyone was trying to ignore. The Galactic Council could not save those children. They were too civilized, too careful, too afraid. Maybe it was time to let the monsters fight the monsters. Very well, Thylak said finally. The Council authorizes Earth Fleet to respond to the Zephyrian distress call. But Admiral Chen... Yes? Bring them home. All of them. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, her expression looked genuinely warm. We will, she said. That's a promise. The UES Retribution hung in space like a sleeping giant. From the outside, the human dreadnought looked almost peaceful. Its dark hull reflected the stars, and its running lights blinked in slow, steady patterns. But inside the massive warship, everything was changing. Admiral Chen Vasquez walked through the corridors of her ship, and everywhere she went, the crew was preparing for war. The casual conversations and easy smiles that had marked their routine patrol were gone. In their place was something harder, colder, more focused. Admiral on deck, called out Sergeant Major Rodriguez as Chen entered the Marine Bay. The massive space that usually held training exercises and equipment maintenance had become something else entirely. Hundreds of Marines moved with deadly purpose, checking weapons, testing armor, and running combat simulations. As you were, Chen said. But the Marines barely slowed down. They had work to do. Rodriguez approached her, his scarred face grim. Ma'am, we've been running rescue scenarios non-stop since we got the mission. The boys are ready. How ready? Chen asked. The kind of ready that scares me, ma'am. Rodriguez glanced around at his Marines. They know what happened to those kids. They know what the Karveks do to their prisoners. The whole crew is taking this personal. Chen nodded. She had expected this. Humans had a particular response to threats against children. It was something deep in their biology, their psychology, their souls. When human young were in danger, humans became something else entirely. Keep them focused, Sergeant Major. Anger is useful, but only if it's controlled. Yes, ma'am. Don't worry about control. My Marines know their job. Chen continued her tour of the ship. In the weapons bay, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Kim was overseeing the loading of specialized ammunition. The human weapons master looked up as Chen approached. Admiral, we're loading the good stuff. Armor-piercing shield breakers and some special packages for boarding actions. Any problems with the alien observers? Chen asked. Kim glanced toward a group of 5 aliens who stood near the entrance to the weapons bay. They had been assigned by the Galactic Council to monitor human military operations. Right now, they looked terrified. They keep asking why we need so much firepower for a rescue mission, Kim said with a grim smile. I told them it's because we plan on rescuing people, not negotiating with slavers. The alien observers were a mixed group. There was Zeltrix, a bird-like Catherian whose feathers kept changing colors with his emotions. Next to him stood Morth Al, a large insectoid whose compound eyes tracked every movement in the weapons bay. The others were equally nervous. Admiral Chen, Zeltrix approached with hesitant steps. Might I ask why your crew is preparing such extensive armaments? Surely for a rescue mission, a more diplomatic approach. Have you ever dealt with the Carvex Syndicate before, Observer Zeltrix? Chen asked. Well, no, but surely even criminals can be reasoned with. The Carvex don't reason, Chief Kim interrupted. They take what they want and kill anyone who tries to stop them. They've been doing it for decades. But the children are hostages, protested Morthal, his mandibles clicking nervously. Surely that means they will not harm them if you approach carefully. Chen and Kim exchanged a look. The aliens still didn't understand. They came from civilized worlds where conflicts were solved with words and compromise. They couldn't grasp that some beings simply chose to be evil. The children aren't just hostages, Chen said quietly. They're merchandise. The Carvex will sell them to the highest bidder. Every day we wait. Every hour we spend being careful, those children suffer. She turned to face all 5 observers. You want to understand how humans think? Here's lesson 1. When someone hurts our young, we don't negotiate. We don't compromise. We don't show mercy. We eliminate the threat. The observers looked at each other with growing alarm. This wasn't how civilized species handled conflicts. Chen's communication device chirped. Admiral, this is the bridge. We have an incoming transmission from the target system. On my way, Chen replied. She looked at the observers. You wanted to see how humans handle this situation. Follow me. The bridge of the Retribution was a study in controlled chaos. Officers moved between stations, checking readouts and running final systems checks. The massive main screen showed a tactical display of their destination, the Carvex system where the Zephyrian children were being held. Put the transmission through, Chen ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a nightmare. The being on the screen had 4 arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws. Its face was a mass of scars and metal implants. This was Warlord Kesithak, leader of the Carvex Syndicate. So, the warlord growled, the famous Deathworlders come to play hero. How amusing. Release the Zephyrian prisoners immediately, Chen said, her voice calm and professional. This is your only warning. Kesithak laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Warning? You are one ship, little human. I have 12 warships and a fortress that could crack moons. But I am feeling generous today. The screen shifted to show a holding area. Inside, dozens of young Zephyrians huddled together. They looked like flower buds, their delicate forms shaking with fear. Some were crying, making sounds like wind through leaves. Your flower children are safe, Kesthak continued. For now. But their safety depends on your behavior. One aggressive move from your ship and they all die. Do you understand me, Deathworlder? Chen's expression didn't change. Behind her, the alien observers held their breath. This was exactly what they had been afraid of. The humans were trapped. They couldn't risk the children's lives. Here are my terms, Kesithak went on. 50 million credits per child. There are 37 of them, so that's... He paused to calculate, almost 2 billion credits. Cheap, really, considering how rare Zephyrian slaves are. The bridge was silent. The alien observers waited for Chen to begin negotiations, to start the careful process of bargaining for the children's lives. Instead, Chen turned to her weapons officer. Commander Torres, tag all Carvex vessels. Weapons free. No survivors. The observers gasped in shock. Zeltrix's feathers turned bright red with alarm. Admiral? The children. If you attack, he'll kill them. Aria, Chen called to the ship's AI. Status on enemy fleet? 12 Carvex warships moving to intercept. The artificial intelligence replied in a calm female voice. They're using the fortress as cover. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 minutes. Good. Marines, prepare for boarding operations. We're going to need prisoners to tell us where exactly the children are being held. Admiral Chen, Morthal stepped forward, his compound eyes wide with horror. You cannot attack. It's suicide. The hostages will be killed. Chen finally turned to face the observers. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but filled with something that made the aliens step back. You still don't understand, do you? You think because we're called Deathworlders, we don't care about innocent life. You're wrong. We care so much that we're willing to do terrible things to protect it. She gestured at the tactical display showing the Carvex fleet. Those aren't just pirates out there. They're predators who make their living by hurting the innocent. They took children from their families. They're planning to sell those children into slavery. But the risk, Zeltrix began. There's always risk, Chen cut him off. But let me tell you what we know for certain. If we negotiate, if we pay the ransom, what happens to the next ship they capture? What about the next group of children? How many more families get destroyed because we were too civilized to do what needed to be done? The screen flickered again. Kasithak was back, his scarred face twisted with rage. What are you doing, human? I can see your weapons powering up. Stop immediately or the children die. Chen looked at him with cold eyes. You made one mistake, Kasithak. You threatened human children. They're not human children, the warlord snarled. There's Ephirian flower spawn. Wrong again, Chen said softly. They're children, and we protect children. All children. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All hands, this is the Admiral. We are going into combat to rescue 37 children from slavers. Some of you may think the odds are against us. Some of you may think this is too dangerous. She paused, looking around the bridge at her officers. You would be wrong. We are humans. We are from Terra. We are predators who chose to become protectors. Today we remind the galaxy why you don't threaten the young when humans are watching. The alien observers watched in growing horror as the human crew prepared for what seemed like certain destruction. They couldn't understand how these beings could be so calm about charging into a battle they couldn't win, but they were about to learn something about humans that the rest of the galaxy preferred to forget. When humans decided to fight, when they truly committed to violence, they didn't fight like civilized beings trying to minimize damage. They fought like the apex predators they had always been. The UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Carvex system like a falling star. Immediately, every sensor on the ship came alive, painting a tactical picture that made the alien observers gasp in fear. Contact, announced Lieutenant Torres from the weapon station. 12 Carvex warships in defensive formation around the fortress. The fortress itself is massive, Admiral. It's built into an asteroid. Estimated crew of 10,000. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. The Carvex had chosen their position well. The fortress sat in the middle of an asteroid field, making long-range attacks difficult. The 12 warships formed a protective screen, ready to overwhelm any single vessel that dared approach. Area. Analysis, Chen ordered. The enemy formation is designed to force approaching vessels into a killing field, the ship's AI replied. Standard military doctrine would suggest retreating and calling for reinforcements. Good thing we're not standard military, Chen said calmly. What about the fortress defenses? Heavily armed, shield generators, mass drivers, particle beam arrays. However, I detect several structural weaknesses that could be exploited. Behind Chen, the alien observers clustered together like frightened children. Zeltrix's feathers had turned a pale yellow that meant terror in his species. Morthal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. Admiral, Zeltrix whispered, surely you can see the situation is impossible. We should contact the Galactic Council for reinforcements. How long would that take? Chen asked without turning around. Several days to assemble a proper fleet. Several days. Chen's voice was flat. Several more days for those children to suffer while we play politics. The main screen flickered to life. Warlord Kesthak appeared again. his scarred face split by a cruel grin. This time he wasn't alone. Standing beside him were two other Carvex officers, and in the background, the alien observers could see Zephyrian children in cages. "Welcome to my system, Deathworlders," Kesethak growled. "I trust you can count. 12 warships, 1 fortress, thousands of warriors, and you, 1 little ship." "We can count," Chen replied calmly. "Good. Then you understand your position. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We will take your ship as payment for the trouble you've caused us. As for your crew," he paused to examine his claws. "Well, humans sell well in certain markets." The bridge crew continued their work as if they hadn't heard the threat. Officers called out status reports. Weapons charged, shields powered up. The alien observers couldn't understand how the humans could be so calm when facing certain death. "I have a counteroffer," Chen said. Kesethak laughed. "Oh, what could you possibly offer me, little human?" "Your life." The laughter stopped. Kesethak's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "Excuse me? Release the children now and I'll let you live." "That's a one-time offer. It expires in 30 seconds. The alien observers stared at Admiral Chen in shock. Was she insane? Did she not understand the situation? 1 ship against 13 was suicide. Even if the human vessel was powerful, the mathematics were impossible. Kesethak's expression shifted from amusement to rage. "You dare threaten me? In my own system? Surrounded by my fleet?" 20 seconds, Chen said, consulting her watch. "You stupid, arrogant Deathworlder. I should kill half those flower spawn just to teach you respect." 10 seconds. "You want to see what happens when you threaten the Carvex Syndicate? I'll show you." Kesethak turned to one of his officers. "Prepare the children for execution. When this human ship is debris, we'll send pieces of dead flower spawn to the Galactic Council as a message." "Time's up," Chen said quietly. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "You heard him. He just threatened to murder children to make a point. Any questions about what we need to do here?" The response from the bridge crew was immediate and unanimous. "No, ma'am. Area, begin attack run. Target the lead vessel." "Admiral," Zeltrix called out desperately, "you're committing suicide, and you're dooming those children." Chen finally turned to face the alien observers. When she spoke, her voice was calm but filled with something that made them all step back. "Observer Zeltrix, you and your colleagues are about to witness something that most civilized species never see. You're about to watch humans at war, real war. Not the careful, limited conflicts your species engage in. Not police actions or diplomatic disputes, war." She gestured at the tactical display. "Those beings out there have made their choice. They chose to be predators. They chose to hurt the innocent. They chose to threaten children to get what they want." The ship began to accelerate toward the Carvex fleet. On the tactical display, the enemy vessels moved to intercept, their weapons powering up. "We have also made our choice," Chen continued. "We choose to be the thing that hunts predators. We choose to be the monsters that other monsters fear." "But the children," Morthal protested, "will be rescued," Chen said with absolute certainty. "Because we're not here to negotiate with child slavers. We're not here to make deals with creatures who cage the innocent. We're here to end them." The first enemy shots began to impact the Retribution's shields. The great ship shuddered but continued its charge toward the Carvex formation. On the bridge, officers called out damage reports and tactical updates. "Shields at 90%, reported Lieutenant Chen. "Enemy vessels moving to surround us." "Let them come," Admiral Chen said. "Aria, execute Pattern Delta 7. "Acknowledged." Pattern Delta 7 initiated. The alien observers had no idea what Pattern Delta 7 was, but they were about to learn. Instead of engaging the Carvex fleet at long range like a civilized warship would, the Retribution did something that violated every rule of space combat they knew. It accelerated directly into the enemy formation. "Admiral!" Zeltrix screamed. "You're flying into their guns." "This is madness!" "This is war," Chen corrected. "Aria, target the lead cruiser. Full spread, armor-piercing rounds." The Retribution's main guns opened fire, and the alien observers watched in shock as the massive human weapons tore through the lead Carvex vessel like it was made of paper. The enemy ship broke apart in a chain of explosions, its debris scattering across space. But instead of slowing down or changing course, the Retribution used the explosion as cover, disappearing into the expanding cloud of gas and metal. When it emerged on the other side, it was already targeting the next enemy vessel. How is this possible? Morthal whispered. Their shields should have failed under that much fire. Human ships are built differently, Chief Kim explained as she passed by to check on a weapons console. We designed them to get hurt and keep fighting, just like us. The battle that followed was unlike anything the alien observers had ever seen. They had witnessed space combat before, the careful long-range exchanges that civilized species engaged in. Ships would maintain safe distances, exchange fire until one side's shields failed, and then the damaged vessel would withdraw. The humans fought like wild animals. The Retribution charged through the Carvex formation, using destroyed enemy ships as cover. When two frigates tried to flank it, the human Dreadnought rammed through one of them and used the wreckage as a weapon to destroy the other. When a Carvex cruiser got too close, the Retribution's Marines actually boarded it in the middle of combat, fighting their way to the engine room to plant explosives. This is impossible, Zeltrix kept repeating. You can't fight a fleet this way. You can't win by charging into superior numbers. The mathematics assume everyone fights the same way, Admiral Chen replied. The mathematics assume everyone values the same things. On the tactical display, another Carvex vessel exploded. Then another. The enemy formation was breaking apart, their careful strategy useless against an opponent that refused to follow the rules. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres called out, enemy vessels are requesting permission to surrender. Chen's expression didn't change. Denied? They made their choice when they decided to threaten children. But Admiral, Zeltrix protested, they're trying to surrender. Civilized beings accept surrender. Chen turned to look at him and her eyes were cold as space. Civilized beings don't take children from their families to sell as slaves. Civilized beings don't threaten to murder innocents to make a point. She turned back to the tactical display. These aren't civilized beings, Observer Zeltrix. These are predators, and the only thing predators understand is superior force. Within an hour, 11 of the 12 Carvex warships were nothing but debris. The 12th vessel, a heavily damaged frigate, was trying to limp away from the battle. Should we pursue? Asked Lieutenant Torres. No, Chen said. Let them go. Let them spread the word about what happens when you threaten children while humans are watching. But the real shock for the alien observers came when Admiral Chen turned her attention to the fortress. Instead of attempting to negotiate for the release of the hostages, instead of trying to find a careful solution that avoided risk to the children, she did something that made them physically ill. Marines, prepare for boarding operations, she announced. We're going in. Admiral, no. Morthal stepped forward. The fortress still has thousands of defenders. The children are still hostages. If you assault the station directly, the children will be rescued, Chen said simply. That's why we're here. She looked at the alien observers one more time. You wanted to understand how humans think? Here's your final lesson. When our young are threatened, we don't calculate odds. We don't measure acceptable losses. We don't negotiate with monsters. The ship shuddered as the first boarding pods launched toward the fortress. We win, Chen said quietly. Whatever it takes, we win. The boarding pods hit the Carvex fortress like meteors, their armored hulls cutting through the station's outer defenses and boring deep into its heart. Inside each pod, 20 human Marines sat in perfect silence, their powered armor humming with deadly energy. Sergeant Major Rodriguez checked his rifle one last time and looked at his squad. These weren't just soldiers. They were humanity's finest warriors, trained from birth to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. Each one had survived the brutal training camps of Terra, where only 1 in 10 candidates made it through alive. Remember, Rodriguez said into his comm, we have 37 children to find. The Carvex will use them as shields. They'll put guns to their heads and expect us to hesitate. His Marines nodded grimly. They had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times. They knew what was expected of them. Don't hesitate, Rodriguez continued. Trust your training. Trust your equipment. Trust each other. We bring those kids home. The pods cutting lasers finished their work and the front wall exploded outward. Rodriguez was first through the breach, his rifle already tracking targets. The corridor beyond was filled with Carvex warriors, their weapons firing wildly. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human Marines moved through the fortress like death itself. Their armor absorbed shots that would have killed unprotected beings. Their weapons fired with impossible accuracy. When the Carvex tried to set up defensive positions, the humans simply went through the walls. On the bridge of the Retribution, the alien observers watched the assault through the Marines' helmet cameras. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about civilized warfare. "This is barbaric," Zeltrix whispered, his feathers pale with shock. "They're not trying to minimize casualties. They're not even trying to take prisoners. They're trying to rescue children," Chief Kim replied without looking up from her console. "Everything else is secondary." The camera feeds showed the Marines advancing through the station with mechanical precision. When they encountered resistance, they didn't retreat or call for support. They simply eliminated the threat and moved on. The Carvex defenders, despite outnumbering the humans 50-1, couldn't slow them down. "How is this possible?" Morthal demanded. "The Carvex are experienced warriors. They've been fighting for decades. They've been bullying civilians and raiding merchant ships," Admiral Chen corrected. "They've never fought real soldiers before." On the main screen, the tactical display showed the fortress's defenses failing one by one. The humans weren't just fighting their way through. They were systematically destroying the station's ability to function. Power grids went dark. Communication arrays went silent. Life support systems began to fail. "Admiral," came Rodriguez's voice over the comm, "we've reached the first detention level. Heavy resistance. They've got about a dozen kids here as human shields." Chen's expression didn't change. "Handle it, Sergeant Major." The camera feed from Rodriguez's helmet showed a nightmare scene. A group of Carvex warriors had formed a defensive circle around a cluster of young Zephyrians. The children looked like wilted flowers, their delicate forms shaking with terror. The Carvex were pointing guns at their heads, screaming threats in broken standard. "Stop. Come closer and flower spawn die. We kill them all." The alien observers held their breath. This was exactly what they had feared. The humans were trapped. Any aggressive action would result in the children's death. Surely now they would have to negotiate, to find some compromise. Rodriguez never slowed down. The human sergeant fired 6 shots in less than 2 seconds. Each bullet found its target with impossible precision, threading through gaps in the defensive formation to strike the Carvex warriors without touching the children. In the space of a heartbeat, 12 enemy combatants lay dead. "Sector 1 secure," Rodriguez reported calmly. 12 children recovered. Moving to Sector 2, the alien observers stared in shock. "How?" Zeltrix whispered. "How did he make those shots?" The angle was impossible. The risk to the children. "Human reflexes are roughly 3 times faster than the galactic average," Chief Kim explained. "Human hand-eye coordination is about twice as precise. And these are our best soldiers." She paused to check another console. "Also, they've been training for this exact scenario for months. Every Marine on this ship can put a bullet through a target the size of a credit chip at 50 meters. In the dark, while under fire, the assault continued. The Marines moved deeper into the fortress, following detailed schematics that Arya had constructed from sensor scans. They knew exactly where they were going. They knew exactly where the children were being held. And nothing the Carvex did could stop them. In the fortress's command center, Warlord Kesithak watched his carefully constructed empire crumble around him. His warriors were being slaughtered. His defenses were useless. The humans cut through his forces like they weren't even there. "How many?" he growled at his surviving officers. "We've lost 60% of our forces," one of them reported, his voice shaking. "The humans, they fight like demons. They don't take cover. They don't retreat. They just keep coming." Kesithak's 4 hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to have been easy. 1 human ship against his entire fleet. The Deathworlders were supposed to be cautious about civilian casualties. They were supposed to negotiate when hostages were involved. Instead, they had destroyed his fleet and were now tearing his fortress apart piece by piece. "Bring me the remaining flower spawn," he ordered. "All of them. We're going to end this." Minutes later, Kesithak stood in his command center surrounded by the remaining Zephyrian children. 25 young beings huddled together in terror, while Carvex warriors pointed weapons at them. This was his final card. Even the savage humans wouldn't risk this many innocent lives. "Human Marines," he broadcast on all frequencies, "I know you can hear me. I have 25 of your precious flower children here in my command center. Surrender now, or I will execute them all." The response came from Sergeant Major Rodriguez himself. "Warlord Kesithak, this is Sergeant Major Rodriguez. United Earth Marines, you have 10 seconds to release those children. Kesethak laughed. Or what? You'll storm my command center? There are 50 of my warriors here. You'll never get through us without the children dying. 5 seconds. Rodriguez's voice was completely calm. You're bluffing, Kesethak snarled. No civilized being would risk so many innocent lives. Time's up, Rodriguez said quietly. What happened next was something the alien observers would remember for the rest of their lives. The humans didn't storm the command center. They didn't try to fight through 50 Carvex warriors. They didn't risk the children's lives in a desperate assault. Instead, they did something that no civilized species would have thought possible. They came through the walls. Explosive charges placed by advanced teams detonated simultaneously at 12 different points around the command center. The walls didn't just break, they disintegrated. Through the gaps came human Marines in full battle armor, their weapons already tracking targets. The Carvex warriors had perhaps 2 seconds to react. It wasn't enough. The Marines had studied the command center's layout. They knew where every enemy soldier was positioned. They knew the exact location of every child. When they opened fire, it was with the precision of surgeons and the violence of a hurricane. 50 Carvex warriors died in less than 10 seconds. Not one of them managed to fire a shot. When the smoke cleared, Warlord Kesethak found himself on his knees, surrounded by dead guards and terrified but unharmed children. A human Marine stood over him, the barrel of a rifle pointed at his head. Warlord Kesethak, Sergeant Major Rodriguez said as he stepped through one of the shattered walls. You're under arrest for crimes against sentient beings, trafficking in slaves, and threatening the welfare of children. Kesethak looked up at the human sergeant with 4 eyes wide with shock. How did you know where we all were? How did you coordinate that attack? The precision required. We've been watching you for the last hour, Rodriguez replied calmly. Our ship's sensors can track individual heartbeats through the station's hull. We knew the position of every person in this room. The warlord's mandibles clicked in confusion. But the risk, if even one shot had gone wide, it wouldn't have, Rodriguez said simply. We don't miss. Not when children are involved. On the bridge of the Retribution, the alien observers watched as the last group of Zephyrian children was led to safety by human Marines. The young beings clung to their rescuers like flowers turning toward the sun. Some of them were crying. But now their tears were from relief, not terror. All children recovered, Rodriguez reported. 37 young Zephyrians, all alive and unharmed. The fortress is secure. Admiral Chen nodded with satisfaction. Well done, Sergeant Major. Prepare the children for medical evaluation and transport back to their families. She turned to face the alien observers one final time. Questions? Zeltrix stared at her with something approaching awe. Admiral, what you just did, the precision, the coordination, the risk management, it should have been impossible. It was necessary, Chen replied. Sometimes impossible is the only option you have. Morthal stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the light from the tactical displays. Admiral Chen, I must ask, if the situation had been different, if the risk to the children had been too great, what would you have done? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute truth. Observer Morthal, there is no risk too great when children are involved. We would have found a way. We always find a way. She looked at each of the alien observers in turn. That's what you need to understand about humans. We don't calculate acceptable losses when it comes to protecting the innocent. We don't negotiate with monsters. We don't compromise with evil. We win, she said simply. Whatever it takes, we win. The medical bay of the UES Retribution had been transformed into something that looked more like a garden than a starship facility. The rescued Zephyrian children, 37 flower-like beings whose petals had been wilted with fear, were slowly beginning to bloom again under the gentle care of the human medical staff. Dr. Sarah Kim moved between the young patients with practiced ease, her scanner showing that while the children were traumatized, they had suffered no serious physical harm. The Carvex had kept them alive and relatively healthy. After all, damaged goods sold for less on the slave markets. How are they doing, Doctor? Admiral Chen asked as she entered the medical bay. Physically, they're fine, Dr. Kim replied, keeping her voice low. Emotionally, it's going to take time. They're still terrified that the bad people will come back. Chen nodded and knelt down beside one of the smaller children. The young Zephyrian looked up at her with large, luminous eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. "Hello," Chen said softly. "My name is Chen. You're safe now. We're taking you home to your families." The child's petals trembled. When it spoke, its voice was like the whisper of wind through leaves. "The scary ones. Are they really gone?" "They're gone," Chen promised. "They will never hurt you or anyone else again." Behind them, the alien observers watched this gentle interaction with growing confusion. These were the same humans who had just torn through a fortress filled with armed warriors. The same beings who had shown no mercy to their enemies were now speaking to frightened children with infinite patience and kindness. "I don't understand," Zeltrix whispered to his companions. "How can they be so violent one moment and so gentle the next?" "It's the same thing," Dr. Kim said, having overheard the comment. "We're gentle with those who need protection and violent toward those who threaten them. It's not complicated." The rescue operation had been a complete success. All 37 children were safe. The Karvex fortress was destroyed. Warlord Kesthak and his remaining officers were in custody. But for the alien observers, the mission had raised more questions than it answered. "Admiral Chen," Morthal approached hesitantly. "Might I ask what will happen to the surviving Karvex prisoners?" Chen stood and turned to face him. "They'll be turned over to the Galactic Council for trial, though I suspect the evidence against them is pretty clear. And if they had not surrendered? If they had continued to fight? Then there wouldn't be any prisoners to turn over," Chen said simply. The matter-of-fact way she said it made the alien observers uncomfortable. They came from civilized worlds, where even the worst criminals were treated with a certain level of respect, where rehabilitation was always preferred over punishment. "Does that trouble you, Observer Morthal?" Chen asked. It's just that my species believes in redemption, in the possibility that even the worst beings can change." "So do we," Chen replied. "But not at the expense of innocent lives. Not when children are involved." She gestured toward the young Zephyrians being cared for by the medical staff. "Those beings over there were going to be sold into slavery. They would have spent the rest of their lives in chains, suffering every day, because we believed that their captors deserved a chance at redemption." Chen's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "How many children should suffer so that monsters can have the chance to change? How many innocents should die so that predators can find redemption?" Morthal had no answer to that. The journey back to Council space took 3 days. During that time, the alien observers had many opportunities to watch the humans interact with their rescued charges. What they saw continued to challenge their understanding of the species they had labeled as Deathworlders. The human crew treated the Zephyrian children like they were their own young. Marines who had killed without hesitation just days before now spent their off-duty hours reading stories to frightened flower children. Engineers who had coldly calculated the best way to destroy the Karvex fortress now built toys and games to help the young Zephyrians cope with their trauma. "They have a switch," Zeltrix observed to his fellow watchers. "They can turn their violence on and off like a machine." "Not like a machine," Dr. Kim corrected, having overheard again. "Like a parent. A mother protecting her young is the most dangerous creature in the universe. But she's also the most nurturing. Same instinct, different expression." On the final day of the journey, one of the older Zephyrian children approached Admiral Chen while she was on the observation deck looking out at the stars. "Admiral Chen?" the young being said in its musical voice. "Yes? Why did you come for us? We're not human children. We're not even from the same part of the galaxy as you." Chen knelt down to be at the child's eye level. "Do you know what the most important rule is for humans?" The young Zephyrian shook its head. "We protect the pack," Chen said simply. "All of it. Not just our own species, not just our own families. When someone hurts a child, any child, they're threatening the pack. And we respond to threats against the pack. But we're not part of your pack." "Yes, you are," Chen said gently. "Every innocent being in the galaxy is part of our pack. Every child, every family, everyone who just wants to live in peace and raise their young safely. That's what humans protect." The child was quiet for a moment. Then, "The scary ones. They said humans were monsters." Chen nodded slowly. They were right. We are monsters. But we're monsters who chose to protect instead of prey. We're monsters who hunt other monsters. I'm glad you're our monsters, the child said quietly. When the retribution arrived at Harmony Prime, the Galactic Council was waiting. News of the rescue mission had spread throughout Council space, and beings from dozens of species had gathered to see the human ship arrive. The docking bay was packed, with reporters, diplomats, and families of the rescued children. When the Zephyrian parents saw their young ones walking down the ramp, alive, safe, and smiling for the first time in weeks, the sound of their joy echoed through the entire station. Council Speaker Thylix waited at the end of the dock, her blue skin bright with happiness. Admiral Chen, she said as the human officer approached, the Council owes you a debt that can never be repaid. No debt, Chen replied. We did what needed to be done. Still, Thylix continued, your actions have raised certain questions about human military capabilities. Some council members are concerned about the level of violence you employed. Chen's expression didn't change. Are they concerned enough to do something about the next group of slavers who threaten children, or just concerned about how we handled this situation? Thylix was quiet for a moment. Admiral, you destroyed an entire pirate fleet and fortress in less than 6 hours. The precision of your assault, the coordination of your forces, it was beyond anything we thought possible. It was necessary, Chen said simply. But the implications... Thylix paused, choosing her words carefully. Some species are wondering if humans represent a threat to galactic peace. For the first time since the mission began, Admiral Chen smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Speaker Thylix, humans have been part of the Galactic Council for 5 years now. In that time, how many wars have we started? How many peaceful worlds have we invaded? How many innocent beings have we harmed? None, Thylix admitted. And how many times have we responded to threats against the innocent? How many times have we put ourselves at risk to protect those who couldn't protect themselves? Thylix was quiet. Humans aren't a threat to galactic peace, Chen continued. We're a threat to those who threaten galactic peace. We're a threat to predators who prey on the innocent. We're a threat to anyone who thinks they can hurt children and get away with it. She looked around the docking bay, where human Marines were helping reunite Zephyrian families. We are what we choose to be, Speaker Thylix. We choose to be protectors. We choose to be the thing that monsters fear. Chen turned to go, then paused. But make no mistake. If someone threatens the innocent, if someone hurts children, if someone thinks they can prey on the weak while humans are watching, they will learn exactly what Deathworlders are capable of. As the human crew prepared to depart, the alien observers filed their final reports. Each tried to explain what they had witnessed, to put into words the contradiction that was humanity. How could beings be so gentle and so violent? How could they show such compassion and such brutality? Zeltrix, writing his report with shaking talons, finally found the words, humans are not monsters despite their compassion. They are monsters because of it. Their love for the innocent transforms them into the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. They do not fight in spite of their hearts. They fight because of them. In the depths of space, far from Council territories, word spread among the pirates and slavers who made their living preying on the weak. The Karvek Syndicate was gone. Warlord Kesethak was dead. His fortress was debris. His fleet was destroyed. And it had all been done by a single human ship, in response to a distress call from children they had never met. The message was clear. There were new predators in the galaxy now. Predators who hunted predators, beings who had chosen to become monsters so that monsters could not prosper, beings who called themselves humans but whom their enemies would learn to call something else entirely. The thing that comes when children cry for help in the dark. The thing that answers when the innocent call for justice. The thing that proves that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become something even more dangerous than they are. In the end, the galaxy learned that humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders not because they were savage, but because they were protectors. Not because they loved violence, but because they loved peace enough to fight for it. And in the darkest corners of space, the predators learned to fear the sound of human ships approaching, because they knew that when humans came, mercy was not an option. Justice, however, was guaranteed.